All right, I wanted to give you a graphical kind of analysis or example of what Cowan and Tabarrok are talking about in their example of heating oil with price controls. Remember, 1971, President Nixon freezes all prices and wages. Most of those price controls go away after a while, but the ones particularly on petroleum products stayed in place for a couple of years, and that caused a lot of shortages. And one of the things they talk about is this issue where you had this big heating oil shortage in the northeast of the country, whereas in the southwest of the country, there wasn't a big problem. Okay, particular they're talking about California versus New Hampshire. So let's say that this graph on the left, this represents the market for heating oil in California. On the right, let's call that the market for heating oil in New Hampshire. Now, the price controls went into effect in the summer, where ordinarily the price of heating oil would be pretty low. Okay, and let's say that I'm going to show you the equilibrium prices in these two markets. The equilibrium price in California, let's call PC, and it would be QC units of heating oil that would be sold. New Hampshire. Now, by the way, what's going on here? This is in the winter. It's California. Demand for heating oil isn't going to be particularly high because it's usually warm out here or not particularly cold. And so demand's not going to be real high. And it's also going to be pretty elastic because as you raise the price, probably a lot of consumers are just going to say, well, I don't need that heating oil very much. I can just put on a sweater or something like that. And a lot of that heating oil I was using just to heat my swimming pool anyway, so I don't mind not swimming in the winter so much. So I'm just going to cut back substantially on my consumption of heating oil. On the other hand, you have New Hampshire, where the equilibrium quantity would be here at QN. But notice that for them, the equilibrium price PN is substantially higher. Demand is going to be greater. It's farther out to the right because winters get exceptionally cold in New Hampshire. And also that demand curve is going to be pretty steep, pretty inelastic because they don't have a lot of great substitutes for burning heating oil. I mean, I suppose they can burn wood or they can try to burn coal, but most of the houses that are being built in the 1970s, they don't get heated very well by burning fire in your fireplace. You want oil to burn for your central heating system. Okay, so you've got these two different markets at the same time, and California has a low equilibrium price. New Hampshire has a high equilibrium price, and so what ends up happening is that what would end up happening if it's a free market is entrepreneurs are going to see this price difference and they're going to realize, oh, hey, if I buy up oil in California and I ship it to the East Coast, I sell it in New Hampshire, I can turn a profit, right? I can buy low and I can sell high. And let's assume for the moment that there's no cost of transportation. Obviously, that's not really the case, but suppose that it were true that you could transport it costlessly. Well, then what's going to happen? As you buy up oil from California and you ship it to New Hampshire, supply of oil in California is being reduced, right? It's going to be shifting up and to the left as you buy up their supply and ship it out of the area. And as you do that, that's going to push the price in California up. So let's shift that supply curve to here. Call that QC prime. You're pushing the price in California up. And now you're going to have those extra units to sell in New Hampshire, right? So let's look. It looks like that'd be about this quantity here. QN prime. And that is consistent with shifting the supply curve down to about there. Okay, so as you reduce supply in California and you ship to New Hampshire, you're pushing the supply curve in New Hampshire down. And as you do that, that's going to push the price in New Hampshire to a lower level. Okay, and now notice in this example, I've actually overdone it. Okay, I've raised the price in California now above what the price was in New Hampshire. So we would actually expect, if this was the situation, people would cut back on the amount of oil they're buying in California and shipping to the East Coast. This price in California would start coming down as the supply shifted right. This supply curve here would start shifting up as less oil was being shipped from California to New Hampshire. And these are going to end up in equilibrium. The prices in both of those two markets are going to be exactly the same, assuming there's no transportation costs. If there are transportation costs, then you would expect the price in New Hampshire to be higher than the price in California, and the difference between those two prices is going to be exactly as much as it costs to ship a unit from California to New Hampshire. So that we call that arbitrage, by the way, buying low in one market and selling high in another market. This action of arbitrage, it tends to equalize the prices across markets. And notice that what that's going to do is take the goods from markets where they're less valuable, push them into markets where they are more valuable. The problem is when there was a price control in the 1970s, that is the legislated price. And so it's no longer profitable to ship from California to New Hampshire because there's no, you can't sell at a different price in those two markets. All right. And so that's what was short-circuiting the better allocation of resources in the winter of 72, 73.